Hey friends, man, it just seems to be the case with this work. It's like the old when it rains it pours thing. I'll go for periods of time where things are kind of cruising along, not too much new information flooding in, just kind of like putting one foot in front of the other. And then like in one day, a giant avalanche of insights will all pile into my brain. And so I had a really fun day yesterday. I took Annalise to her swim lesson. And the swim lesson is the swim school has this setup. It's pretty ingenious. You think about it, but they have basically like the pool is in one room and then there's these glass windows. So all the parents just sit behind the windows. You can't actually really hear what's going on. You can see what's going on. You can see what your kid is doing and all the different teachers and whatnot. But you can't be in there causing trouble, and you can't be in there for the kids to run up to the parents and, jump out of the pool constantly. They manage it well. So I was sitting there and I was like, oh, I can listen to one of my favorite podcasts. So I start listening to my podcast and I'm watching Annalise, just having time of my life, little parenting bliss. And I was listening to a dialogue with Ken Wilber, one of my sort of pin-up all-time favorite philosophers, and had a very formative effect on me many years ago when I read his work. And he was talking about he was just kind of having a chat with somebody about I don't even remember the title of the talk, but they were talking about how essentially everything in our life is shadow work. And by that, what that means is anything we react to strongly in our environment, in our relationships, wherever out there in the world, we're reacting to it strongly because it's an aspect of ourself that we have projected outside of ourself, and we haven't fully integrated it. This goes for negatives and it goes for positives. So people who drive us nuts are people onto whom we have projected some aspect of ourself that we haven't fully owned. This feels kind of, in some ways it feels counterintuitive, because a lot of times we'll see people out there whom we vehemently disagree with, or we deeply resent what they stand for or whatever. And so it feels like we're not projecting onto something that's like myself. We're projecting onto something different. I'm experiencing something that's at odds with who I am or how I feel or my convictions or whatever. But upon closer reflection, what we almost always find is I don't react strongly to people and things unless they have the power to hook me somehow. Why? What's the hook? This is where Sadhguru talks about, I love what he talks about when he says, for true transformation, we have to take responsibility for everything we're responsible for, and take responsibility for everything that we are not responsible for. Take responsibility for everything. And when we have that sense of someone else or something offending us, and it kind of gets our goat, it piques our ire, whatever form that takes, whether it's anger, righteous indignation, victimization, whatever it is, essentially always going to find is there's an aspect of myself that I've projected outside myself. Now, this goes also for positives. Ken and the person he was having this chat with were talking about how this is at play in romantic relationships as well. We're going to project an aspect of ourself onto our beloved. We can see out there in the world someone who seems an embodiment of the properties of our opposite, for example, and whether it's a man or a woman or whatever energy we inhabit, whether the body is male or female, gender doesn't really matter. It's more what's our kind of energetic identity and what are we seeking in the external. We find someone onto whom we can project our sense of what of those qualities, and all of a sudden we are in love. There's an object out there in the form of another human being that becomes the object of our love. Now, I know we're not objectifying people, but the fact is, subject and object are still at play, even in relationships among conscious beings. To some degree, that's part of the issue. Is we've turned other people into an object that is a reflection of something within us. And so the reason why I say there was an avalanche of insight coming through was because this morning I wake up and maybe it was something about having had this, having kind of gone through this, having heard this conversation yesterday, something had kind of gotten kicked up in me. I woke up this morning and I was just looking at some aspects of myself in a new way and kind of going, there's some things here that I don't always want to look at. And then I sort of had a moment where, you push through that initial moment of resistance. Because as soon as I see an unflattering reflection of myself, right? As soon as I see that, the initial response is always, no. I don't know if anybody out there doesn't have this response, please call me and tell me how you're doing it. Because when I see a version of myself that is ugly, that is not the version I want to be seeing, I recoil. But it's important to notice that recoil only happens in the psychological dimension. There's no existential recoil. The existential aspect of ourselves doesn't recoil. It's the ground of all of it. If we can remember that, if we can stay there, if we can identify with that, then all of a sudden we can look at something that may not be flattering to the mind or the body or the ego, but not resist seeing it. And if I can not resist seeing it and own it, begin to own some of those negative aspects of myself, I can stop projecting them. I can stop encountering them because I won't be continually looking for hooks in my environment onto which to throw my own unexamined or unowned stuff. And, ultimately, whether I fully transcend or dissolve or let go of those negative aspects of myself or not, I think that in a lot of ways, we can heal and we can grow and we can overcome and we can dissolve and release. But that really isn't the starting point. That really isn't where that's not the point. The point is to know and really own our full self and be able to project outside of ourselves less and less. Because that's growth, that's integrity, that's reducing these beautiful phrase yesterday. Corey, the interviewer with Ken yesterday used a phrase, he called it reducing the opacity of the self. So in other words, the degree to which I see myself as a fixed entity, as a thing, and as identified with a kind of concrete identity, I start to see myself as I can see through it a little more. It's a little more light coming through, and I understand that the features of the self are not concrete things, they're constructs. Even my experiences are constructs. My experiences are they're projections so that I can witness whatever I need to witness in order to grow, in order to accept more and more of reality into my awareness. So this idea that I don't look away from my own ugliness, that when I see something ugly, I see an image of myself that I really don't like. It's like against all of our instincts. But it's like the key. It's the key to everything that happens after that point in the growth of the self and the not needing the self, not needing myself to be perfect before I can have integrity, before I can embody my full self. If I have to be perfect before I can truly own myself, it's going to take me 8 billion zillion lifetimes. We will never be perfect. We got to own what's there, even if it's a little bit like getting thrown in cold water. So, kind of what showed up today. Thanks for watching, folks. I appreciate you. So much love. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.